Hello and welcome back to What the Flash. Today I've pulled out the iMac 7.1 again. 10.6.8 was what was on the device when I got it. I think when it was launched it came with 10.4, but the latest version that can be officially installed on this iMac 7.1 is 10.11, which is also known as Capitan. I think they're still pretty capable, and in my opinion I think they're quite handsome as well. You know, they still look really good, at least to my eyes. And my eyes are a little screwy, but anyway, if all you need is something to browse the internet, I sort of envision it as being the perfect device to have in the kitchen, on the kitchen counter, or on a table, somewhere where you might want to just sit every now and then when you're having a coffee, check your emails, but also follow recipes, you know, the BBC Good Food recipe book, that kind of stuff. So I think that's a great use for something like this. You could do a little bit of office productivity, things like office.com and the Google's G Suite or Workspace or whatever it's called these days. So if you imagine using it for web access and for basic productivity, I think these things are a steal. You can get them on eBay for practically nothing. In fact, there are places, if you check out your local free press, your local classifieds, that kind of stuff, they're even going for free because they are basically just landfill. If you don't know what you're doing, you've basically just got landfill. So what we're going to do on this one is we're going to get El Capitan downloaded. I'm going to put it on a USB stick, and then we're going to get it installed. What holds this iMac back? All right, so firstly, as I said, we have macOS 10.6.8, which is kind of old. It's not retro old, so it's not cool like macOS 9 or something, you know, cool for a nerd, but it is old. All of these icons, if you look at the bottom there, they kind of look a bit rubbish, to be honest. If you've got a newer version of like a newer Mac or a newer Mac OS installation or an iPhone, these icons, these are what they kind of look like in sort of 2008, 9, 10, something like that. And then somewhere along the road they got changed and they look a lot sort of cleaner now, at least to my eyes. So if we open this old version of Safari, we can still get on the Apple website. It just looks a bit funky. But how many times are you going to be looking at the Apple website? I mean, let's be honest. If you're working with an iMac that you found on eBay or Craigslist or, you know, whatever, or you found, you know, you've got one that's been left in storage somewhere because you thought it was at the end of life, you're probably not going to be looking at the Apple webpage. If you were looking at the Apple webpage for a new Mac, you're probably not interested in saving one of these older ones as well. Unless you're like me and you just like having, you know, working on these sort of little projects, you like having a little tinker. Let's have a look at YouTube. Now, YouTube kind of works. The browser is struggling to load up some of the newer things. If you notice here, like the browser bar, for example, it's not working properly. And it might be just that Safari is a bit naff. And Safari doesn't necessarily have the best reputation. I think a lot of people, especially people that maybe have a little bit more interest in controlling what they do out there, not necessarily being controlled by people like Apple, for example. And I don't mean that in a bad way. But you'll typically find a lot of people install Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox as one of the first installations they might do when they get onto a new Mac. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get the latest version of Google Chrome that will work on this OS operating system, and then we'll try YouTube again. Okay, so what we can see here is that the certificates are valid, but the problem is that all operating systems need to be told about something called a root authority or a collection of root authorities. Now, a quick word on a root authority. For the modern internet to work, we use things like HTTPS, which allows us to verify that youtube.com is really youtube.com. And pretty much all websites use this now. So even, my personal blog or, your local, the local church probably has a HTTPS website. Now, in order for us to know about every single website, to make sure it is who it claims to be, that would be quite difficult for our computer to hold that information. It would be very large if we had a directory of all trusted websites. That would be pretty massive. And also, it wouldn't be very flexible. It wouldn't allow for when websites become untrusted, or when they expire, when they close down, when the people don't want a domain anymore. And it wouldn't allow for when new websites appear. It would be pretty unfair if, a very trustworthy website popped up, really awesome, got a great, blog content or something, but because our computer doesn't know about it, we don't trust that website. Okay, so instead we use something called a root authority, and this is a small group of organizations that whoever maintains our operating system, so this is the same on Windows and macOS and Linux and anything else you can think of, whoever maintains that operating system, they maintain a list of root authorities, companies they trust to trust someone else. So it's kind of like if I trust a DigiSign, let's just say, and DigiSign trusts youtube.com, then I can trust youtube.com. Root authorities change, and how we identify a root authority in terms of its certificates or its public key, that changes. So quite often we get updates. We get updates for the operating system all the time, but quite often in those updates, there will be an update to one or many root authorities, or the details for one or many root authorities. So the way we prove that youtube.com is youtube.com is we go to the website, our computer checks, is this certificate valid, who signed it, okay, this is a root authority. Does the signature of the root authority match what I know about the root authority? Okay, and the problem with our Mac is because we've got 10.6.8 and it's not had an update for a very long time, the certificate for youtube.com is valid. Our computer no longer knows enough about the current root authorities to be able to trust the certificate that we're seeing. So that's why we're seeing messages like this. Okay, so this is going to be a problem that we see quite a lot on these old Macs. It's certainly a problem that I see a lot because I like tinkering with these old Macs. There is a really neat way of getting around this, and I'm probably going to talk about that in another video. But essentially, we can build a very light proxy service on our machine. Now, it sounds like, or that might sound like, a big project or a big challenge, and it really isn't. It's really quite simple, actually. Essentially, what we do is we use some open source software. That open source software goes away and speaks to whatever it speaks to get a list of root authorities and trusted sources. Okay, it keeps that software up to date. That software has nothing to do with Apple, okay, or Microsoft or Windows or or Linux or anything like that. Okay, so we essentially get rid of the check for HTTPS because all our computer does is it asks the proxy server, which is also running on our computer or somewhere else in our network, do you trust this website? And our proxy server, knowing what it knows about current root authorities, it can make that decision. So to us, the website seems safe again. So that's one way we can get around that problem. Okay, but getting around the problem with HTTPS isn't unfortunately the end of the problem. Okay, so websites are built with things like React or Vue or .NET or something like that. They're libraries and they're updated really quite regularly. mostly to take advantage of new features that are built into new web browsers. And sometimes they push the web browsers into taking advantage of features that they are developing. So it's kind of like a circle. So although we can get around the problem with HTTPS by using a local proxy server, we can't get around the problem of our old browser not understanding how to use a website. Sometimes, like that Apple website, it just looks a bit naff. It doesn't quite look as well as it does if you look at it on your phone or a different computer. But in other situations, when you get to the website will just reject you, simply reject you, because either they know the functionality isn't going to work the way they want it to work, or there are other issues that they're concerned about. So, for example, if you go to YouTube for Kids, even with a proxy server, so we've got around the HTTPS problem, the website will simply tell us we need to get a new browser. So we're kind of stuck there. Getting around an old browser problem is going to be a lot harder than getting around the HTTPS problem. Essentially, when Apple stops supporting the old version of macOS, other developers will also stop supporting it as well. Maybe not as quick as Apple, in fact, very unlikely to be as quick as Apple, but it will eventually stop. So when there are no more new browsers available for our version of macOS, the websites just stop working. Okay, so eventually we will get to a point where the internet isn't available to us and we are essentially pushed out of the market. So that's kind of where we are now. We can still find older software, but it is going to be harder. Now, I'm holding Option or the Alt key at the restart, and that takes me to the boot options screen. From here, you can see I have 2 hard drives and 1 USB device. Now, you might see something different. I have macOS. I also have Linux at the moment, and the USB device is the device I've just plugged in. Now, you may see more or less partitions. Sometimes there is a macOS installation and a recovery partition. That's quite common. And sometimes there is an OS partition and a data partition. It's a little bit less common, but it is there. And sometimes you may have just more than one disk. For me, I'm going to click on the USB drive and then we'll continue. Now this is going to take a bit of time because it's a mid-2000s machine, so we still only have USB 2.0, so it's going to take a little while to pull all of that information over. I'll speed it up, but this would be a great time to go grab a drink if you were doing this at home. Okay, so installing macOS isn't very hard, just lots of point and click. It's very simple. Actually, most modern OSs are like this now, so we don't really need to talk through it. I think you can figure it out. What I will say in my situation, or I'm going to remind you in my situation, I'm going to wipe the disk. Okay, so I'm just going to delete everything and start all over again, including my Linux partition. That's no problem. I can create that again later. You might want to take a different route. You might just want to install macOS straight away. If you're using the USB stick, or like I said, from the actual, from your previous Mac installation, that is fine as long as you know the password. In my case, I don't, so it's easier for me to just wipe the disk and start again. Okay, let's get this sped up and we'll come back in at the end of the installation. Okay, right, now that took ages, especially that about a minute remaining, which took about 30 minutes at least, although I wasn't counting it, I wasn't timing it, but it was ridiculous how long that took. Now, as a warning, I wouldn't give up if I were you. It nearly always will work. Just leave it running. Just go grab a drink, go do some housework, go do some other work, whatever. It will eventually get to the end. So we're now finished that part and we're going into the first boot. And again, we're just doing some typical setup. This is the kind of stuff you get if you are lucky enough to have bought a brand new Mac at some point. You know, you open the lid on your MacBook or you turn your iMac on or whatever, and then it starts asking you, what's your network? Where do you live? What do you want to be called? Or what are you called? You know, those kind of things. What password do you want to use? So this is all quite common. Okay, and now we're in. And wow, I did kind of forget how pretty El Capitan was, to be fair. I mean, I love those newer looking icons anyway, but that wallpaper is really nice, a lot nicer than what we've been looking at before. And I would say arguably nicer than the wallpaper I have on a newer MacBook Air. That I don't know what the OS is on that one anyway, so, but I just forgot how nice that looked. System information looks nicer to me. It's a little bit nicer to see how things are used, like the memory, for example. But you'll notice things are running a bit slower, and that might just be the system doing some kind of indexing or whatnot. But we'll keep an eye on that, and for now, we'll just check for some updates. Okay, whilst we're waiting for that, let's see if our internet browser works better in this version of macOS. Okay, so YouTube didn't load, but again, this is an old version of Safari, and Safari isn't, you know, doesn't have the best reputation in the browser space, I suppose. We do have an update. It comes from 2018, so that's still a long time ago, but it's a lot newer than 10.6.8. That's still pretty old though. All right, let's get this started. It's pretty big, 1.2 gig, wow. Let's continue with Chrome. Okay, I'm not sure why the camera keeps pulsing at this point. Autofocus is obviously going a little bit crazy, but don't worry about that too much. Okay, so let's see how far we get in Chrome. We might as well try Firefox as well. Okay, as I can see here, we can't get the latest version of Firefox because they've mandated an even newer version of macOS is required. So they want us to have 10.14, and this iMac can't officially support that. It maybe unofficially if we use something like Core Legacy Patcher or something, but I don't know the details on that yet, so I'm not going to go into that. Now, Firefox Extended Support release is kind of aimed at businesses anyway, people that can't update their browsers. You know, it takes a long time for a big company to update applications. You know, it is going to work, it's just going to be missing some of the new features. Okay, let's get rid of that. Okay, so we have Chrome, let's try it. I'm going to remove all of these dock icons as well because I don't really want to see them. I know I just said they look nice, but I just aren't interested in a lot of this. Okay, youtube.com. Okay, it is slow, but it kind of works, right? Okay, so let's pick on Linus Tech Tips again, because I, quite like that channel, and oh yeah, I do really want to check out this mic review anyway. In an earlier video, we saw that in Linux Mint, the CPU was working quite hard when we were on YouTube. Now, as a reminder, YouTube did work in 10.6.8, but I couldn't access YouTube Kids. And for now, this iMac is going to be used by my little ones, my children. So that's one of the things I want to address. And okay, as you can see in 10.11 or El Capitan, with Chrome at least, we are able to access YouTube for Kids. Okay, so that kind of ticks the box that I need today. And I've probably talked a bit, I've probably talked enough already. So I think on that note, we'll call this video done. So thanks for watching. Check back soon for more ways on extending the life of old hardware, especially these Apple devices, which I'm drawn to. I still think they look really nice. And I'll also look at making some content on how we can set up that proxy service. It's really simple. It will likely be quite a short video, but we'll do that in the future. It's not something I've necessarily got planned at the minute. Okay, so thanks, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.